Hello, this is going to be the walkthrough of how to do lab number 2. So let's get started. Let's say open a file here on our Python Anywhere. We're going to put it in a location and lab2a.py. Click on new file and it should open up our new file. So I've got the instructions on the right hand side of the screen and I'm going to be working with the Python on the left. So make sure that before you do lab number 2 that you've finished lab number 1. So step number 1 is going to be asking the user to enter in their name and then repeat their name back to them with hello. So in Python, in order to get user input, we're going to use a keyword called input, and that result is going to be stored as a string type. So the command we're going to say is we're going to use a variable called name and say name equals input, and then we're in the parentheses, we're going to put what we want to prompt the user for. So what is your name? Okay, and then we're going to echo back to that person the word hello, and then we're going to add to it onto the end of the string hello whatever is in the variable name. We can go ahead and click on run here, and then on the bottom it's going to give us the output. So what it's going to do is it's just going to ask us for our name, and we type in our name and it just echoes back hello and then our name. Perfect. Oops, let's go on the back. Step number 2, we're going to ask the user to enter their age and then print out their age 5 years from now. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the input keyword and store an integer value into a variable, and then we're going to do a calculation and then print out the result. So to be able to add 5 to the user input, it has to be converted to an integer. In order to do that, we use the same syntax that we did up in step 2. So x is going to be our variable, and we're going to say input what is your age. Now, remember when we did step 1, we said it's going to give us back a string. So in order to get a numeric back from it, we put that entire command into parentheses and we type the word int in front of it. It's exactly what is on that step number 2. Then let's say print, and we're going to say whatever is in the variable x, and we're going to add 5 to it. If we go ahead and click on the run button, it'll go through and do step number 1. It's going to ask our name, and it's going to ask the age, and it's just going to print out the number of whatever I enter in plus 5. So in this case I put 22, so it's going to put 27. That's all there is for number 2. So for number 3, what we can do is we're using the same information for step 3, or step 2, sorry, step 3. Okay, so we have the input here on line 6, so I'm not going to retype it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the syntax of how it's spit out at us. Right here it's just giving us a number. Let's format that number so it looks a little bit better. So I can use the print, and I can say in 5 years you will be, and I can use that plus sign again. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that string that says in 5 years you will be with the space, and it's going to add on whatever I tell it to. So what I want it to add on is I want it to tell x plus 5, but that's going to put a number. So I'm going to tell it I want it to be a string. So I'm going to put the word str in front of it. And then I'm going to finish it off by saying years old. Okay, let's go ahead and run that and just see what that one line does differently. So it is going to ask us our name, and it's going to ask us our age. So now what it does, it takes the text, whatever is in those quotes, it puts it out, and then it's going to add the 27, which is the x plus 5, and it's going to type out the word years old. That's all there is to in step 3. Step 4, we're going to ask the user to enter in values, and what we're looking for here is, instead of them being whole numbers or integers such as an age, we're going to have something called a float. And a float is going to be a decimal number, so for example, we look here, it's going to be 33.7 hours. Okay, so let's go step by step, and it says let's calculate the amount of pay an hourly worker will get from working in a week. Ask the user to enter in the number of hours worked, convert this to a floating point value, and store this variable. Now we've done this all just like we did in syntax in line 6. So let's go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste line 6. Now I'm going to change the name of the variable because we want to make it have a variable name that means something. So we're going to ask them for hours worked. Okay, we don't want a whole number integer this time, we actually want a float, and that's down here in the hint. It's going to say it's not an integer, so you're going to use the word float. Now in the quotation marks, what we want to say is enter the number of hours worked. Okay. That's going to do all of those steps all in one. So that is going to ask the user to enter the value of, enter the numbers worked, right here where it says input. It's going to convert it to a floating point variable, that's what that word does, and store it in a variable. There's my variable name. Okay. Now it's going to, we need to come back here, ask the user to enter in their hourly wage, but not with the $, convert this to a floating point value, and store the result. So I'm going to create a variable called hourly wage. I'm going to put in it a float, and I'm going to start with the input and say enter your hourly wage without the $. Okay. Now, once again, that does all three things. We're storing it into a variable. It is a float type or a decimal number, and we are asking the user for input all in one line. I'm going to come on back over here to my instructions and scroll up just a little bit. So for step 5, what it is saying is it wants you to print out the result of a calculation using a single print statement with the concatenation. Now, calculate the weekly paycheck and print out a message using one print statement and using concatenation to display the image or the message below. So that right there is going to be identical to how we did this line right here in step 3. So I'm actually going to copy what's in step 3 and paste it down here. Now we're going to have different things in there for the different text. So we want it to say your gross pay this week is. So your gross pay this week is. Okay. Space and the $. Now remember, we're not going to have the $sign in there, so we can just put it into the text. That's not a big deal. Now, what we want to calculate on the other hand is we're going to say hours worked times hourly wage. Okay, because that's what's going to give us the gross pay. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to hit save. I'm going to click on run real quick. It is going to start over. Jennifer, 22, what's is my age? Okay, here we go. Enter the hours worked. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit on the example, and I'm going to say 33.7 hours worked. Enter your hourly wage, $11.32. And it should multiply it out and give you the answer. Now, one thing please don't forget, there are some questions here at the end. The input function returns what type of value? Well, if you come back up here, up into step 1, the input function is used to accept input. The result is stored as a string. So the answer to the first one is that the input function returns a value of type string. To use the value in mathematical calculations, you need to convert it to one of two types. Well, here we've used two types to convert it to a number. If you look back in our code on line 6, we created an int type. And then on 13 and 14, we used of type float. So the answer to this question is to use this value in mathematical calculations, you need to convert it to type int or float. To concatenate a number to a string, such as in a print statement, what function do we use? Well, if you look back in the code that we used for the first, for Lab A's steps, we did do a calculation on line 10 and we did a calculation on line 17. In both cases, we used something called an str function in order to take it from a numeric back into a string. Okay, let's move on to Lab 2B. Let's go ahead and create a new file, lab2b.py. And let's take a look at our instructions. So here we go. Step number 1. Step number 1 says define a function that returns the average of 3 numbers. So here we're being told that the def command is used to define a function. So def is for define. We want to type in the commands below. So let's go ahead and type in def for define, average, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Num1, num2, num3. One thing you do have to add after the header is a colon, and you can click enter. Now, Python Anywhere is smart enough to know that when I've typed def, I'm defining a function, and so it does do the indent for me. So I can just say return num1 plus num2 plus num3 divided by 3. So what I'm doing is I'm returning the value of the average of those 3 numbers. Now I can go ahead and click save and click run. Now not a lot is going to happen because all I've really done is to define a function. So if I come back here and I can say type the commands and then click run again. So that's going to allow me to actually use this function. So if I use the keyword print, it's going to print it out to the screen. Let's use the function and let's say 759, and then let's also do the number 667. Okay, let's go ahead again and click on the run, and it tells us that the average of the numbers 579 is going to be 7.0, and the average of the numbers 6, 6, and 7 is going to be 6.333. Let's go ahead and move on to step 2. We're going to print out the value of a parameter outside a function definition. So we're going to type in these commands below and click run. We've got these 2 print statements are already in our commands, so let's go ahead and print the word number 1. Now there are some questions in here. Is this going to work? And why do you think it will or will not? So I'm going to give a hint. It's not going to work, and it's not supposed to work. So when you look at these, the only place that you have used the variable num is up here in line 2 and 3. This is within your function. If you define a variable within a function like that, it's not known outside of the function. So this line in 9 isn't going to work. Let me put a little hashtag in front of it to turn it into a comment, and that way we don't have to see the error every time we try to run the program. Ooh, and look, I went from step 2 to 4. Okay, So let's jump into step 4. Define a function that converts a dog's age into human years. So one way to calculate a small dog's age is to use this rule. Okay, so dog's age in human years. Define a function called dog years. Okay, so let's start with that. So we're defining a function which we use the DEF word. We're going to call it dog years. Okay, and what it's going to take into it is it wants to be the dog age. Okay, if I use it, oh, don't forget the colon. If I use the same understanding that I have up here on line 3, I'm going to say return, and what I want to return is what this expression is in here. Okay, so what I want to return is the 24 plus dog age minus 2 times 4. Okay, 24 plus dog's age minus 2 times 4. Okay, that right there, those two lines, that's going to take any dog age and give you back the human years. Okay, now it says write some input statements to get some human years. So human years, actually I want dog years, equals input enter in dog years. Now remember, this gives me a string. I don't want a string, I want a number, and so I'm going to say int. Okay, if you forgot how to do that, go back to 2a and it'll help you. Okay, next write an output statement to display the number of dog years. So what we did in 2a was that we used the print, and we want to say how many dog years is equivalent to how many human years. So the very first thing that we see in this is actually the variable that we asked for. Okay, so we're going to make that an str, and we want dog years. Okay, we're going to concatenate it by using that plus sign, and we're going to use the single quotes. Dog years is equivalent to, okay, we want to know how many human years. Now, in order to calculate the human years, we did it with this function here. So we want a string. We want to do the dog years function, and we want to send it dog years. Okay, let's finish our string. Okay, let's go ahead and click run, and let's pick our window back up. Okay, how many dog years? Let's start out with the first one. It says 5. 5 dog years is equivalent to 36 human years. That's what we have here. Let's go ahead and click and run it again. Enter dog years. We have 11. 11 dog years is equivalent to 60. That's all we're looking for step number 4. The very last step to this process, let's see, for lab 2 is for step 5. Calculate an ice cream stand bases the prices on it of its cones on this rule. Price equals scoops times 1.15 plus 2.25. Define a function that calculates the price of a cone. So remember, in order to do these functions, you can look back at 2 and 3, or you can look back at 12 and 13. We're going to type the word def for the function, and we're going to say calculate the price. What it's going to take in is, if you look at this equation up here, what is the variable is number scoops. So let's say scoops. Okay, don't forget your semicolon, your double dot, sorry. Let's do it the same way we did on line 13 and 3. Return, and let's do the calculation in there. So what we want is scoops times 1.15 plus 2.25. Okay, that's all we need for our function. Okay, now ask the user for the number of scoops, print out the price below. So let's go ahead and use this example. First we want to print out just the full text. Ice cream, cone price, calculator. Okay, the second one is going to be the input. So number scoops equals, we want it to be an integer because we don't want a half a scoop, right? So input, how many scoops would you like? Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to print out how much it's going to cost you. So let's do a print. This time it says a blank scoop. So that number is going to come from what the user input. So it's going to be number scoops, because it's going to be whatever we put in right here on line 23. And then dash scoop cone will cost, and the $sign. Okay. Then what we want is we need to convert it to a string, and we're going to do calc price, and we're going to send it number scoops. Okay, now one thing I forgot over here is this variable, we made it an int, we need to put it back into a string. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, let's go ahead and do a run. I'm going to try this example right here to make sure that it works. Hit save and click on run. So our dog one goes through, but okay, here we go. Ice cream scoop price calculator. How many scoops would you like? I would like 4. A 4th scoop cone will cost you $6.85. And that's exactly what we have here as the output. That's all there is to Lab 2. Parts A and B. I hope this answered some questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out.